What if our moon was hollow? Would we be able to hide inside in case some terrible catastrophe destroyed our home planet? Well, the supporters of the hollow moon theory believe that it's actually a real option. The hollow moon is a hypothesis claiming that Earth's moon is either completely hollow or has quite a lot of place inside. The thing is, the moon is less dense than Earth, and it seems to support the idea of its hollowness. But according to science, the reason is the fact that Earth's upper mantle and crust are less dense than the heavy iron core of our planet. Then, there's also the claim that the moon rings like a bell. For almost a decade, between 1969 and 1977, seismometers installed on the moon by the Apollo missions kept recording moonquakes. The moon was reported to be ringing like a bell during such quakes, especially shallow ones. On the 20th of November, 1969, Apollo 12 deliberately crashed the ascent stage of its lunar module into the surface of our natural satellite. According to NASA, after that, the ringing continued for almost an hour. This made some people argue that the moon must be hollow like a bell. Later, lunar seismology researched those shallow moonquakes and showed that they acted differently than quakes on our planet, mostly due to differences in type, texture, and density of the lunar and Earth's rock layers. The speed of sound waves in solids is determined by the medium's compressibility and density. No one has ever found any evidence of a large empty space inside the moon. And still, in 1970, Michael Vasson and Alexander Sherbakov suggested a hypothesis that the moon could be a spaceship designed by mysterious extraterrestrial beings. In 1965, writer Isaac Asimov made an observation that added fuel to the fire of conspiracy theories. He marveled at the sheer astronomical accident that the moon fits so snugly over the sun during total eclipses. The sun's greater distance makes up for the incomparably larger size of the star. As a result, it seems to us that the moon and the sun are the same size. The author added that there was no astronomical reason why the sun and the moon should fit so well. So since the 1970s, conspiracy theorists have been quoting Asimov's words about solar eclipses as evidence of the artificial origin of the moon. Mainstream astronomers disagree with such an interpretation, saying that the angular diameters of the moon and the sun don't perfectly match during eclipses. They vary by several percent over time. Many other pieces of evidence confirm that the moon is a solid body that formed after a planetoid crashed into Earth. In the past, scientists thought that the moon appeared after our rapidly spinning planet got rid of a good chunk of its mass. This idea was suggested in 1879 by George Darwin, the son of the very Charles Darwin, the famous biologist. This theory remained popular until the Apollo missions. Then, in 1925, Austrian geologist Otto Ampferer offered another idea, that Earth and the moon could have formed together from a primordial accretion disk, a rotating disk of dense gas and dust surrounding a young, newly formed star, and used to be a double system. The third theory stated that the moon could have once been a planetoid caught by the gravity of our planet. The modern explanation usually involves the giant impact hypothesis. According to it, a Mars-sized space body hit Earth and created a debris ring around our planet. In the end, this ring gathered into a single natural satellite, our moon. But getting back to the hollow moon theory, at the moment, there's no scientific evidence to support this hypothesis. Seismic observations and other data indicate that the moon has a solid interior with several layers, a thin crust, quite extensive mantle, and a dense core. These days, the idea of the hollow moon is considered to be a conspiracy theory. Technological progress does not stand still, and over the past decade, the resolution of images of the lunar surface has improved greatly. Many pits have been discovered on the surface, and some of them are really impressive in size. The largest are hundreds of feet deep. However, technology is not yet advanced enough for us to study the bottom of such pits in detail. That's why a recent discovery is surprising. It turns out that huge pits can extend deep into the rock of the moon. It's a groundbreaking discovery. Let's figure out why. So look at this giant underground cave. Leonardo Carrere and Lorenzo Bruzone from the University of Trento were thrilled to finally confirm the existence of such structures on the moon. They analyzed images taken by the mini RF instrument on board the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter in 2010. The original images didn't have excellent resolution, so the authors had to do a huge amount of work, using modern data analysis and modeling techniques. But first things first, why does it all matter so much? Well, instead of building homes on the surface of the moon, we might be able to live inside these natural caves. They could offer protection from dangerous things like harmful space radiation, extreme temperature swings, and even meteorites. According to planetary geologist Wes Patterson from Johns Hopkins, even though we'd still have to bring materials from Earth to make those caves habitable, using them would be a lot easier and cheaper than building bases on the surface. Based on the collected data, the cave is about 150 feet wide and up to 260 feet long, which is just a bit smaller than a football field. It's located in a deep pit called the Mare Tranquillitatis Pit, which likely formed when an ancient lava tube collapsed. Although the moon has no active volcanoes today, billions of years ago, its surface was covered with lava that flowed through valleys, carving out these tubes below the surface. Over time, some of the lava tubes became unstable and collapsed, creating pits like the one in question. NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, has already found more than 200 of such pits on the moon. It means there could be hundreds of hidden caves waiting to be explored on our satellite. When publishing their findings in Nature Astronomy, the researchers suggested that the caves could offer future astronauts a safe place to live and work, protecting them from the moon's extreme conditions. And extreme they are. One of the biggest challenges of living on the moon is its temperatures. The lunar surface gets extremely hot during the day, reaching about 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the temperature drops below minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit at night. But inside the caves, the temperature could stay much more consistent. A separate study done in 2022 used computer simulations to predict that some of those caves could maintain a comfortable temperature of about 63 degrees Fahrenheit. Much easier to manage, right? Unfortunately, getting to the caves won't be easy. The Mare Tranquillitatis cave is over 400 feet below the surface, at the bottom of a steep slope covered in loose debris. It would take some clever engineering to get up and down that slope. The options could be using jetpacks, a lunar elevator, or some other kind of technology. We must find a way to transport astronauts safely. There's also a lot more to discover. Radar technology could help scientists find even more caves and lava tubes on the moon. In the future, a spacecraft with higher resolution radar could even map the insides of the pits that LRO has already found. According to the researchers, this kind of complete survey could help them figure out the best locations for future lunar bases and other explorations. And there's another potential bonus. Those caves could contain water. Scientists have already found frozen water on the moon, under the surface, and in permanently shadowed craters. Tiny amounts are also scattered across the lunar dirt. Water is a critical resource for any moon base, and finding it in the caves could make the idea of living there even more realistic. All in all, this discovery could be a game changer for lunar exploration. Living in natural caves on the moon might be a more practical and safer option than building something on the surface. It could also bring us one step closer to making the moon a place where humans can live and work for the long term. In December 2016, a bombshell revelation rocked the world of classified intelligence. WikiLeaks had released top-secret Pentagon documents exposing a hidden war between the US Air Force and unidentified flying objects. According to these explosive files, the center of this interstellar conflict was none other than Antarctica, Earth's most remote and enigmatic continent. During the summer of 2016, the US Missile Defense System detected an entire fleet of UFOs rising from the Southern Ocean and heading at high speed toward the Mexican coast. American fighter jets were immediately scrambled, but just as suddenly as they appeared, the mysterious objects vanished from radar, leaving behind only questions and ripples of fear in high-ranking circles. And this, insiders claimed, was only one of many such encounters in a long-running covert battle beneath the ice. The story spread like wildfire across forums, alternative news sites, and YouTube channels. Eyewitnesses reported that the surfacing UFOs created enormous waves, damaging ships in the area. Other reports spoke of alien bases discovered deep beneath Antarctic ice, with entire zones marked off-limits to the public. Some even claimed that Russian President Vladimir Putin was being briefed on secret skirmishes between US forces and non-human entities. The truth seemed ready to explode into public view. But how much of this is real? And did WikiLeaks actually publish such world-shattering documents? Since 2010, WikiLeaks has indeed released hundreds of thousands of files, diplomatic cables, military reports, and surveillance data. While some documents reference unusual aerial phenomena, none mention extraterrestrial conflict in Antarctica. The story's origin can be traced to a post on European Times, a dubious website known for spreading unverified claims. It cited anonymous Russian intelligence officers as the source. From there, the tale snowballed through conspiracy blogs that forged fake scans of supposed US documents, complete with seals, signatures, and official stamps. Yet under closer examination, these documents crumble. Fonts are inconsistent with military formatting. Signatures are copy-pasted from unrelated sources, and crucially, no corroborating evidence exists. Why did this theory stick? Despite its shaky foundation, the story refuses to die. Why? 1. Real secrecy in Antarctica. The continent is governed by strict international treaties. Military activity is restricted, creating a veil of mystery that invites speculation. 2. Historical myths. Tales of Nazi bases, ancient alien ruins, and lost civilizations buried under Antarctic ice have long fueled the imaginations of conspiracy theorists. 3. Real UFO sightings. The US military has confirmed encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, such as the famous 2004 Tic Tac incident, adding legitimacy to UFO narratives. 4. The WikiLeaks halo. For many, anything associated with WikiLeaks automatically seems credible. That association lent weight to the fabricated documents. Antarctica's vast, silent expanse is a fertile ground for myth-making. From secret bases to wormholes, the continent has become a canvas for every kind of fantastical speculation. Even real locations like Lake Vostok, a subglacial lake Russian scientists spent decades drilling into, have been dragged into alien lore despite zero scientific evidence. Unusual military flights near Antarctica in 2016 and 2017, including Boeing RC-135 reconnaissance planes, added fuel to the fire. Officials cited training and climate research, but to believers, they were part of a hidden campaign against otherworldly threats. The tale of a secret UFO war exposed by WikiLeaks is thrilling, but ultimately, it doesn't hold up. There's no credible documentation, no trustworthy sources, and no confirmation from WikiLeaks itself. Like many conspiracy theories, this one blends fragments of truth with layers of fiction, creating a narrative too seductive to let go. But seductive isn't the same as true. Behind the allure lies a stark reality. No aliens, no Antarctic war, just another myth, thriving in the shadows of secrecy and our eternal hunger for the extraordinary. Still, as long as Antarctica stays silent, the legends will grow, because nothing feeds the imagination like a blank, frozen slate at the edge of the world.
There's something happening inside the moon, something that nobody expected. Not a dramatic shift you'd see on the outside, but deep down, where things seem frozen in time, scientists have uncovered a hidden layer of what you could only call moon goo. Remember those school lessons about the crust, mantle, and core? Much like the Earth, the moon is made up of layers, a crust, mantle, and core. However, the moon's core is much smaller compared to ours. Earth's core is huge. It makes up about a third of our entire planet's mass. The moon's core makes up only about 1 to 2% of its mass, and its diameter is about 1/5 the diameter of the moon itself. It's surrounded by a hard, rocky mantle. But it turns out that between these two layers, that mysterious goo layer, and it's way more important than you might think. The layer is soft and partially molten, ebbing and flowing like the tides in our oceans. It rises and falls, stretching and shifting as if it were alive. Its movement isn't chaotic, but subtle and regular. We always knew that the moon influences our seas and oceans, causing tides with its gravity. But it turns out that we influence it back. The goo ocean reacts to the gravitational dance between Earth and the Sun. Also, the molten layer could be made of ilmenite, a very intriguing material. Ilmenite is rich in titanium, a strong and lightweight metal that we really love over here on Earth. Titanium is used in everything from airplane parts and spacecraft to medical devices, even in everyday items like bikes and laptops, all because it's incredibly strong and very resistant to corrosion and heat. So, if the moon might have a molten layer rich in ilmenite, that would be awesome. Astronomers are already planning for lunar bases, and if we had a material to build structures, spacecraft, or even tools for astronauts right there, that would be a game changer. Otherwise, we'd need to transport materials from Earth, which is extremely costly. This is our first tangible sign that the moon is not just a cold, boring rock. Instead, it's dynamic, living, and breathing, with moving forces beneath the surface. NASA used new special tools to discover this: the Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory and the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter. These are both space missions designed to study the moon, but they don't just look at the surface like a telescope. Instead, they help measure things we can't see with our eyes, like the moon's gravity and how it changes over time. Grail sent 2 small spacecraft around the moon named Ebb and Flow. Clever. The idea was for these spacecraft to fly close to each other and measure tiny differences in the moon's gravity as they go. It's like they were feeling the moon's invisible pull in different places. If the moon's gravity was stronger in one spot, the spacecraft moved closer together, and if it was weaker, they moved farther apart. This helps scientists understand what's going on inside the moon, even if they can't actually go there. And the spacecraft intentionally crashed into the moon in December 2012 to end the mission. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter is a bit different. It takes super detailed pictures of the moon and collects other important information about its surface. By combining the information from both Grail and LRO, we were able to find this goo layer. But this discovery actually challenges everything we thought we knew about lunar geology. How did this molten layer get there? How long has it existed? And perhaps more fascinating, how it stayed warm for millions of years? That's $1 million questions. The moon's core generates heat just like ours. But it's not as easy as saying, oh, the core's heat probably keeps it warm and molten. Well, first, the moon's core is much smaller and less active than Earth's, meaning it produces significantly less heat. Plus, the moon is much cooler than Earth in general. With temperature dropping to minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface, how could this inner layer still stay in this flowing state? That's still a mystery. In any case, this goo could actually explain a lot of stuff about the moon. For example, astronomers were exploring moonquakes and how they happen. Now they think that it might be this semi-molten layer shifting and moving beneath the surface. Now, beyond the moon itself, it also tells us more about other celestial bodies. If the moon, something we considered basically a huge static rock, has such a dramatic life, what about other planets, moons, or asteroids? Could they also hide similar hidden movements beneath their surfaces? We can even understand our own planet better, learn more about how tides and similar stuff works. There are so many great discoveries we've been making on the moon. Recently, we found some awesome stuff beneath the surface, massive caves hidden for millions of years. For over 50 years, scientists have suspected that the moon's surface is full of underground tunnels and caves. These are known as lava tubes because they were formed by lava. Duh! Millions of years ago, the moon was pretty unstable. It underwent some volcanic activity, causing eruptions. When a volcano erupts, lava can flow across the surface. As the outer layer of the lava cools and hardens, it forms a solid roof of dark material. It's actually what these famous dark spots on the moon are. These are dark, hardened remains of ancient lava. But the hot, molten lava continues to flow through the center. Once the eruption ends and the lava drains away, what's left behind is an empty hollow tunnel, hence a lava tube. On Earth, we have lava tubes in places like Hawaii or Iceland, where volcanic activity has created similar underground tunnels. The same thing happened on the Moon billions of years ago, although they're much crazier compared to ours. In fact, lunar lava tubes are now thought to be some of the largest and longest in the entire solar system. One such cave was discovered beneath the famous Mare Tranquillitatis, the place where Apollo 11 first landed, and it's at least 340 feet deep. Now, all these lava systems have remained hidden just beneath the surface, untouched for millions of years. Only now, they finally managed to prove their existence. Scientists from the University of Trento in Italy found them using special radar technology and advanced computer methods. These techniques let you see underground by sending radar waves. The waves bounce back and give clues about what's hidden underneath. By analyzing the way these waves reflected back, the researchers could detect the shape and size of the hidden caves. Now, the best thing about this discovery is that we could build all our bases there. These caves protect from radiation, harsh winds, and meteoroids. NASA even found evidence that some of these caves stay at a steady 63 degrees Fahrenheit. That's some crazy coziness for the Moon. And on top of that, there could even be some water there. So humans could take shelter inside these natural tunnels and build entire colonies on the Moon. And I know what you're thinking. Could unexpected lunar monsters hide deep in those caves? Well, sure. There's a huge potential for exploring these caves and finding some awesome stuff. But even if we manage to find a miracle, like small life or microbial organisms, there's a 99% chance that there won't be actual animals or monsters. It would just be impossible for them to develop in such conditions. But it would make a great horror movie. Researchers want to send robots or drones to explore the tunnels first, and then see if they're safe enough for humans. And it's not just the US getting in on the action. China is also investigating the possibility of using these moon caves as a future base, showing that the race to explore and settle the moon is heating up.
Did you know that in 1958, two powerful rivals planned to take the lead in the space race by launching an atomic bomb at our natural satellite? What would have happened if they had gone through with it? Who the hell thinks bombing the moon is a good way to win a popularity contest? On top of that, we're going to find out if anyone ever did bomb outer space and why. Stick around, because what we're about to tell you sounds incredible. But it actually happened, and even Carl Sagan was involved. It's not like there weren't better ways to grab attention, but let's be honest, who wouldn't want to see some space fireworks? That was pretty much the thinking behind the US Air Force's secret project, A119. This top-secret initiative aimed to launch a nuclear bomb at the moon, hoping the explosion, with enough megatons, would be visible from Earth with the naked eye. To understand why such a wild idea could even seem reasonable at the time, we need to look at the context. In the 1950s and 60s, international tensions were sky high. The aftermath of World War II and the rise of two rival superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, led to the Cold War and the famous space race. That race brought incredible scientific advancements: artificial satellites, robotic landers on the Moon, Venus, and Mars, the first human orbital flight, and eventually, the first moon landing in human history. But not every project launched during the space race was a win. Some were total failures, or worse, absurd and dangerous ideas that cost governments tons of money just to prove who had the bigger rocket, so to speak. Project A119 also aimed to answer some questions in planetary astronomy and astrobiology. Like what, you might ask? Well, for example, what would happen if a nuclear bomb exploded on the moon? A very original study, you have to give them that. Despite its age, it remains one of the few declassified reports on the topic. And to make this case even more interesting, young Carl Sagan was part of the team.
He was responsible for predicting the effects of a nuclear explosion in vacuum and low gravity. This bold idea, to detonate an H-bomb on the moon for everyone on Earth to see, seems to have been sparked by a rumor published in the Pittsburgh Press in 1957. The article claimed the Soviet Union was planning to celebrate the anniversary of the October Revolution with a big bang on the moon. The explosion would take place at the moon's terminator, the boundary between its lit and dark sides. Apparently, Project A119 also considered the terminator as a target. The article also mentioned that if the Soviet missile missed, it would fall back to Earth and disintegrate in orbit. But what it didn't mention were the even bigger consequences if it did hit the lunar surface. But wait, what could possibly go wrong? The moon's super far away, right? Well, a lot could go wrong. It depends on the bomb's yield, of course, but what if a 100 megaton bomb exploded on the moon's surface? That would trigger a series of very unfortunate events. Since the moon has no atmosphere to dampen the blast, there would be no shockwave like on Earth. With nothing to contain or slow it down, the explosion would just keep expanding monstrously. Terrifying, right? But that's not all. The moon would experience a massive quake that could shake the entire body. Though, to be fair, back in 1958, there were no lunar bases to destroy, so that wasn't a big concern yet. The impact would pulverize the lunar surface, launching dust and debris into space in all directions, including Earth's path. Many of these micrometeorites could rain down on our planet, causing damage. While the blast on the moon wouldn't go on forever, it would eventually cool and lose energy. The leftover radioactive material would slowly settle back onto the surface. And without natural processes like Earth's rain or erosion to clean it up, the radiation would stay there for a very long time. So, what eventually happened to the US's Project A119 and the Soviet Union's Project E? Well, what had to happen? Both were scrapped due to the extreme risks and the possible impact on future lunar colonization. Now, a question some of you, especially Star Wars fans, might be wondering is, were there no more plans to blow stuff up in space after that? And the answer is, oh yes, there were. It wasn't exactly a bomb, but in 2009, NASA deliberately set off the equivalent of about 2 tons of TNT with the LCROSS, Lunar Crater Observation and Sensing Satellite. The goal was to see if there was frozen water in the Cabeus crater on the dark side of the moon. They crashed the probe into the moon, and the mission was a total success. Yes, there's water on the moon. Also, during the Cold War in 1962, the US launched Project Starfish, the largest nuclear detonation ever carried out in space. It was a high-altitude test that caused a massive electromagnetic pulse so strong that it messed up the very instruments meant to measure it. It even affected Hawaii, causing about 300 streetlights to go out, triggering burglar alarms and damaging phone lines. Now you know who and why someone wanted to nuke our dear satellite. But as it turns out, we couldn't change the moon's orbit or get a fireworks show that easily. The moon's too massive and the consequences are way too dangerous. But hey, it's all just a cold case now, right? There's no one still trying to prove who's bigger and stronger by nuking stuff. Right. Let us know in the comments if you already knew about this case, and until next time.
Soon we might start constructing loads of stuff on the moon. All because India's moon mission has recently detected sulfur near the moon's south pole. This chemical element can come in extremely handy for creating infrastructure on our satellite. It's the first time this chemical element has been discovered on Earth's natural satellite. This sought-after element is mostly found near Earth's volcanoes. Its appearance on the Moon speaks volumes about the satellite's volcanic history and its past atmospheric conditions. The mission's rover detected this chemical element less than a week after touching down around 70 degrees from the Moon's south pole on the 23rd of August, 2023. This historic landing on the lunar surface made India the fourth country to safely land a mission on the Moon. It's also the first spacecraft to touch down so close to the south pole of our satellite. It's an area of strategic importance because it's believed to be home to deposits of water ice. If it turns out to be true, future missions might be able to harvest it and turn this water ice into drinking water or even rocket fuel. For 2 weeks, the lander carried out the data collection, mainly focused on the analysis of the Moon's soil and its extremely thin atmosphere. Meanwhile, the solar-powered Pragyan rover started its quest to find frozen water on the Moon. As for the lander, it demonstrated another amazing feat on the 3rd of September. The spacecraft fired up its engines and lifted itself for about 16 inches into the air. Then it made a tiny hop to land 12 to 16 inches away from its original position. It's kinda a big deal. Being able to get a lander back off the surface of the Moon is essentially for future missions, showing that they can safely return soil samples or even astronauts back home after a lunar mission. In September, the Indian spacecraft was put into sleeping mode. The 14-day-long lunar night was approaching, and the spacecraft wasn't designed to collect scientific data during this period of time. So far, we've learned about a few major findings of the mission. One is related to measuring the temperature of the Moon's topsoil at different depths. Intriguingly, the surface of the satellite in that region turned out to be hotter than expected. It was believed that the temperature could be between 68 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface, but it was around 158 degrees Fahrenheit, way hotter than it should be. The other discovery indicates the presence of several chemical elements, including oxygen. Besides, the data received from the spacecraft confirms the presence of aluminum, calcium, iron, titanium, silicon, and other chemical elements on the lunar surface close to the South Pole. The rover also used special instruments designed to measure quakes and rumbles beneath the lunar surface to detect some seismic activity. It brings us back to the sulfur detected thanks to the rover's spectroscope. Scientists are currently working on figuring out whether this element formed on the surface in a natural way or whether it's the result of volcanic activity or a meteor strike. Another astonishing thing found on the Moon is a rock, and it may be the oldest known Earth rock. A 0.7-inch wide chip included in a large rock collection brought to our planet by Apollo astronauts might actually be a 4 billion-year-old fragment of Earth. This finding could help us paint a better picture of the intense pounding early Earth got at the dawn of its life. It could go like this. Soon after the rock formed, an asteroid impact might have blasted it from Earth. At that time, our planet's satellite was 3 times closer to Earth than it is today. The collision was so powerful that this chunk of terrestrial rock found its way to the Moon. Later, this fragment got engulfed in a lunar breccia, a motley kind of rock. Eventually, the rock was brought back home to Earth by Apollo 14 astronauts. Even though scientists had found meteorites coming from Mars and the Moon before, it was the first time a rock from the Moon turned out to be a terrestrial meteorite. They also found out that the rock had formed in a water-rich environment at temperatures and pressures corresponding to those at around 12 miles beneath the surface of our planet. In 2019, China's Chang'e 4 mission made history by landing on the far side of the Moon. The mission's rover helped researchers visualize structures hidden deep below the surface of the satellite, revealing billions of years of lunar history. The Yutu-2 rover made this discovery with the help of its lunar penetrating radar. It imaged deep into the moon's surface and listened to echoes of sound bouncing back off structures hidden from view under the surface of the moon. It turned out those structures were resting at depths of almost 1,000 feet. The research suggests that the first 130 feet under the surface are made up of layers of dust, soil, and rocks. The instruments also discovered a concealed crater that must have formed after a large object slammed into the moon's surface. Long, long ago, ancient lava was likely to be flowing deep underground. Researchers believe that the broken rocks around the formation might be debris produced by the impact. They also found that the volcanic rock layers were thinner the closer they were to the surface. Such a thickness variation of lava flows might mean a decrease in the number and magnitude of eruptions over time. So, lunar volcanic activity gradually dwindled since the moon's formation around 4.5 billion years ago. On the far side of the moon, there is one of the largest and oldest impact craters in our solar system, the South Pole Aitken Basin. Unfortunately, from Earth, you can only see its outer rim, which looks like a huge chain of mountains. It's a ginormous 8-mile deep dent, stretching for more than 1,500 miles in diameter and covering 1/4 of the moon's surface. Astronomers are sure that this crater appeared when an asteroid collided with the moon around 4 billion years ago. And now, look at this gigantic chunk of metal the size of 4 states of Connecticut. As for its weight in pounds, it's enough to say that the number contains 18 zeros. This mysterious mass is hidden about 180 miles under the moon's surface, somewhere in the middle of the South Pole Aitken Basin. It was discovered when GRAIL, which stands for NASA's Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory Mission, gathered data about our natural satellite. When examining this information, scientists noticed that in one place on the moon's surface, there was a weird change in gravity. After researching this phenomenon, they concluded that something mysterious was weighing down the basin floor there. So far, researchers haven't figured out the origin of the bizarre lump, but there are several theories. One of them claims that the finding is a chunk of dense oxide, which appeared when the moon was just taking its shape. At that time, the satellite was still covered with ancient oceans of magma, and the lump could be formed at the final stages of its cooling. However, most scientists support another theory, according to which the puzzling mass is part of the giant asteroid that once created the South Pole Aitken Basin. Since the thing is metallic, it's probably the iron-nickel core of the asteroid. There might be a labyrinth of lava tubes on the moon. Not so long ago, astronomers received the results of underground topography and discovered a massive cave under the surface of Earth's satellite. It could be the result of the lunar volcanic activity that happened more than 3 billion years ago. Streams of lava hardened, creating a thick, hard crust on the outside. But inside, it kept flowing, melting the rock and creating tunnels and caves. Numerous small pits in the moon's surface discovered by NASA seem to be the openings to such lava tubes. If this theory is confirmed, the underground tunnels might serve not only as a convenient location for human-crewed space missions, but also as much-needed water sources for astronauts.
Okay, I officially give up on the hope that the moon is made of cheese after all. Wow, not even Gouda. The shiny lunar ball, or a curved banana, or half of a coin, depending on what phase it's in, has different layers inside, just like Earth. One of these layers is called the inner core. About 20 years ago, scientists were observing how the moon rotates. Using that data, they concluded that it had a fluid outer core. But the inner core was hard to study, so they didn't know if it was solid like a rock or molten like a hot liquid. But things are clearer now. Astronomers have collected data from different missions, including the Apollo missions, where astronauts went to the moon and gathered information themselves. Plus, they've used a special technique called seismic data. This method is all about studying how sound waves move through things. Take earthquakes on our planet as an example. When an earthquake happens, it creates waves that travel through the ground. Scientists can detect and analyze these waves to learn more about Earth's interior. The same idea can apply to other objects in our solar system, or planets, or, in this case, the Moon. When quakes or moonquakes happen, they generate sound waves, and by carefully listening to and studying these waves, scientists can create a detailed map of what's inside the object. They can figure out things like different layers, what they're made of, and how they're arranged. To check the Moon's deep interior, scientists also use something called laser ranging. This method measures the distance between the surface of the Earth and the Moon very precisely. And ta-da! Our natural satellite's inner core is a dense, solid ball made of iron, just like Earth's. It's about 310 miles wide, which is nearly 15% the size of the entire Moon. Researchers also have stumbled upon evidence that supports the theory that the layer between the Moon's surface and its core, called the mantle, has been moving around as the Moon evolved over time. This movement is something we call lunar mantle overturn, and it could explain why we find elements rich in iron on the lunar surface. Mantle material ends up being carried upward, and the volcanic rock remains in the Moon's crust. Some of the materials in this rock were too dense, like me, so they just sank back through the lighter crust material all the way to the core mantle boundary. It's like a cycle where the Moon's mantle material goes up during volcanic activity, carries iron-rich elements to the surface, and then sinks back down. There's another mystery scientists have been trying to solve: what caused the Moon's magnetic field to weaken and nearly disappear over time? It seems that now that we know about the iron core and the global mantle overturn, we might get some more answers about the Moon's magnetic field. Knowing what the inner core is like can help us better understand the Moon's history as well as the history of our entire solar system. Now, one of the theories that's widely accepted about the origin of the Moon says there was a massive collision between Earth in its early stages and another mysterious object in our solar system. It's called the Large Impact Theory, and this collision was so strong it ripped off a big chunk of the primitive molten Earth. I mean, not so big compared to what's left. If you put a US nickel next to a green pea, you get a good idea of how big our planet is compared to the Moon. Now, this chunk was set into orbit around our planet, and this might have happened about 95 million years after our solar system formed. The object that collided with Earth could have been about 10% the mass of our home planet and roughly the size of Mars. Well, it makes sense. Earth and the Moon do have similar compositions after all. Of course, there are other ideas about how the Moon formed. One says that the gravitational force of our planet captured it. This means that the Moon was just an object innocently passing by when suddenly it got attracted and pulled into Earth's orbit. There's even a hypothesis that Earth stole the Moon from Venus. Ooh. In that case, the Moon shouldn't complain. I guess the view is way better here. So yeah, the Moon and Earth are similar when it comes to rocks and some minerals. But the Moon doesn't have the same atmosphere as our planet. Its atmosphere is thin and consists of some weird gases that include potassium and sodium, which is not something you can find in the atmosphere of Mars, Venus, or Earth. And the rocks on the Moon don't contain water, but that doesn't mean there's no water at all up there. A long time ago, in the 17th century, astronomers saw large dark spots on the Moon's surface. One of these astronomers thought these spots looked like oceans, and he called them maria, which means seas in Latin. Other astronomers also made maps of the Moon, and they used the term maria to describe these dark spots. For example, Mare Tranquillitatis translates to Sea of Tranquility, where Apollo 11 made its touchdown. But it seems those dark spots are not actually oceans. They are plains made of hardened lava that erupted long ago. These volcanic eruptions left behind smooth flat areas called basalt plains. In the late 1800s, one sky watcher studied the Moon and found it didn't have an atmosphere. Without an atmosphere, there are no clouds and no air to keep water from evaporating. So scientists thought that any water on the moon would just disappear right away. They believed the moon was totally dry. But then, in 1961, one physicist had a different idea. He pointed out there could be water on the moon in special areas called permanently shadowed regions. These are spots on the moon where the sun doesn't shine, so they stay dark all the time. Water ice could exist in these dark areas because they're extremely cold and the ice wouldn't evaporate. But when astronauts from the Apollo missions went to the moon, they brought back soil samples, and scientists found no signs of water in them. So everyone went back to thinking that the moon was completely dry. In the 90s, NASA focused on these shadowed craters and found high concentrations of hydrogen, which meant there could be ice at the moon's poles. They still weren't certain, so they kept digging and, after a while, found hydrogen trapped inside tiny beads of volcanic glass. Since there are no active volcanoes on the moon today, which means water probably was present on the moon when these volcanoes erupted long ago. Plus, there could be way more water back in the early days of our moon. In 2020, NASA's SOFIA mission showed us what we'd been looking for a really long time. There is water on the moon after all. It turns out the water is hidden within the grains of lunar dust or sticking to the surface in the sunlit areas of the moon. So there are no oceans like we have on Earth, but at least there's something. The question remains, how did water even get there? It seems the moon had a chaotic history back at the time when it was forming, as probably most of the planets and moons in our solar system. So there is some evidence that water came there from comets hitting its surface back in the old days, or maybe even keeps on coming from those that are slamming into the moon right now. We're talking about a chaotic situation where icy micrometeorites collide with the moon's surface, and dust then makes an even bigger mess when interacting with the solar wind. But we're waiting to find out more about this. Because, as we all know, when you mention water, you also inevitably talk about life. That's why we want to know more, for instance, about all that ice hidden in polar craters on the moon. Maybe it can teach us more about how life developed on Earth. Maybe comets brought all the necessary elements here. Then, what if there are some of those elements stuck in the ice on the moon, too?
Our moon exploration project started out in 1969. Sure, there have been some problems along the way, but astronomers are certain we'll get back up there pretty soon and with better knowledge and technology. However, there's an 800-year-old trick that might become way more useful than fancy GPS tech and powerful rockets. It's called the Fibonacci sphere. Some scientists at a Hungarian university stumbled upon this idea while studying the moon. They believe it might be useful to better understand how the moon spins and how it's a bit squished while it goes around Earth. You might believe that our planet and its satellite are these perfect little spheres floating in space. Well, that's not true. They are in fact like slightly deflated soccer balls because of all the gravity, rotating movements, and tides. The GPS technology we use here on Earth is already adapted to these less than perfect ball proportions. Remember, our planet is a bit flattened at its poles. If we're going to make a map system for the moon, we need to do the same for its shape, called a solenoid, or what scientists call the moon's version of our Earth's shape. Since the moon is less compressed than our planet, scientists have been taking a shortcut until now. They've been looking at our satellite as a simple ball shape. However, with all these new projects coming up in the following decades and even some exciting trips we might end up having on the moon, we need to be more precise. Scientists now believe we should get the real data and start drawing an accurate picture of the moon. Here's where the Fibonacci sphere comes in handy. It's a clever solution that's been used by mathematicians to spread points out evenly on a ball. Scientists recently used it to map around 100,000 spots on the moon using data previously collected by NASA. And what they found was crucial for our understanding of the moon's shape. For instance, we now know that our satellite's poles are about 0.3 miles closer to the center compared to the moon's equator. Sure, it might seem like a tiny detail, But if we adjust our GPS software accordingly before we land on the moon again, it might save us from getting lost up there. This level of math hasn't been done since the 60s for the moon, but we already know it works wonders here, at home, so it only makes scientists better prepared for future missions. This isn't the first time people have used Fibonacci's findings to come up with clever solutions. We've also seen it put to work in finance, agriculture, and in computer science. Let's see where it all came from. Legend has it that the Italian mathematician Fibonacci wasn't really that interested in mathematical sequences at first, but rather in rabbits? So, he came up with this interesting puzzle. What happens if you place a pair of rabbits in a certain space for a year? He also set some theoretical rules. For starters, all those bunnies come in boy-girl pairs, and they can start reproducing after just a month. Each month, each bunny pair adds one more pair of bunny offspring. The last rule was that all bunnies would be invincible for the year. Doing the math, he got this series of numbers. 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, and so on. If you look at this series again, you'll notice that every number is the sum of the two before it. The first two, that's your starting bunny pair. Next, you'll see the number 2, which is the first pair and their first offspring pair. Word caught on about this interesting sequence, and math lovers began studying it more closely. They started seeing this pattern very often in nature, like in how leaves grow on a plant or how seeds arrange on sunflowers. There's even a little experiment you can do to check it out. Start by grabbing some paper and a pen. Try drawing the Fibonacci spiral. Start with a tiny circle, then go bigger and bigger using those Fibonacci numbers. The first circle should just be a tiny dot on the paper, or the equivalent of 0. Next circle, 1 unit. Another circle, still 1 unit. Keep it going and you'll see that the circles form this spiral pattern. Even as it continues to grow, it keeps its shape. You might have also stumbled upon the Fibonacci spiral as a symbol of hypnosis. In all fairness, there's little evidence you can confuse someone by making them stare into a spiral for a while. But its effects on our focus and our optic nerves can't be ignored. After you've stared at a spinning spiral, you might see how objects get smaller or bigger depending on the direction of the swirl. It's easy to understand why some experience this sensation as hypnotizing. This interesting series of numbers appears in our day-to-day lives, even if we don't notice it. It can also be used in more practical instances, like converting miles to kilometers. Let's look at the series 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13. Pick any two numbers side by side. Say 13 and 21. Do the calculations and you'll notice that 13 miles is about 21 kilometers. Same with 34 and 55. Music and math might not seem like they're connected. But if you had asked the great Mozart, he probably wouldn't have agreed. It seems he was very passionate about numbers from early on in his career. He loved finding cool number patterns in music, like some sort of hidden messages. His own sister even remembered him doodling math all the time, even on the sides of his music sheets. Some scholars believe he might have even played around with the Fibonacci numbers. If that's really the case, then he might have used the ration to balance out parts of his tunes. What about other types of art? Well, it's also said that Leonardo da Vinci used the golden ratio in his masterpieces, like the Vitruvian Man and the Mona Lisa. Also, when it comes to great pieces of architecture, the Parthenon might have used this pattern too. Anytime you see buildings with columns spaced just right, you can be certain that's where the builders drew inspiration from. The Great Pyramid of Giza is another great example. There's no official record to prove it, but the pyramid's shape is so close to the golden ratio that it's kind of obvious. You'll also see this pattern appearing naturally in our environment. Go out in our garden and check to see if you have any pine cones lying around. See those scales? They're set up in a pattern according to the Fibonacci sphere. Even the bones in our body seem to be growing based on the same proportions. We've got one torso, one head, and one heart. Then there's stuff that comes in pairs. Our arms, legs, eyes, and ears, for instance. For the number 3, think about the composition of our limbs and the 3 main sections in our hand. The wrist part, the middle palm part, and our fingers, which are also split into 3, by the way. Oh, speaking of fingers, their bone lengths have this ratio too. This design helps our fingers move smoothly, especially when grabbing objects. The Fibonacci sequence can be seen in the way ocean waves curve, and how rivers split and flow too. Weather patterns can also follow this rule. Some whirlpools and hurricanes form and spread out in the same way the Fibonacci spiral does. Zoom out, and you'll see that spirals aren't just found here on Earth. They're also everywhere in space, and it isn't random. Most galaxies, including our Milky Way, are spirals. Think of it like this. Generally, stars in a young galaxy don't all appear at once. Some are faster when developing, others take their time. This makes gravity pull in different ways, making the young galaxy spin like a disk. As it spins, different levels of gravity stretch it into getting these spiral arms. On the flip side, if all the stars in a young galaxy appear at the same time, gravity just smushes it all into an egg shape, or what the astronomers call elliptical.